So I want to welcome everybody to this conversation, which normally in the middle of the week I have a chance to share some of my own thoughts, but this week it just seemed much more appropriate for me to set my thoughts aside and have a conversation where we get to hear from someone else. We, over the last 2 weeks, have been hearing news out of the United States since the tragic and violent death of George Floyd. We have been seeing the protests, the reactions to that injustice, and Erone Newman, who has been attending Westview for the last year, was brought to my attention, and just this seems like just a really natural connection because of your own experiences as a Black woman in Canada, and experiencing what it's like to not only witness these events, but I suspect we're going to hear some of the other side, the more personal side as well. So we wanted to hear from you, Erone, and we're really glad that you can do this. For those who haven't met you, Erone has recently retired, well, recently as in a little over a year ago, and retired from a nursing position in Toronto where she was the director of a heart program. Has come to London for retirement and has found a church home at Westview, which we are delighted about. And Erone, maybe I'll let you say a little bit about yourself so that we can hear from you directly, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Okay, well, as you can see, I'm a mixed race Black woman. My dad was English and Irish, which always makes people wonder because way back then, the English and Irish hated each other. Mm-hmm. And my mom was Scottish and African descent. So you can see that I come from a line of people who go against the grain. I grew up in Jamaica. I studied nursing in England. And then I immigrated to Canada, where I continued my studies and advanced my career. I'm now retired. I have 2 sons and a daughter.
Very good. And we wanted to take some time to talk about what's been going on over the last couple of weeks, as I said. And I guess, first of all, I just want to ask, when you watch the news, when breaking news like the death of George Floyd came out, what goes on inside of your mind, your heart?
Well, my first thoughts were, oh God, we're reliving the 1960s. I grew up in that era. And I thought, poor Martin, he must be groaning in heaven. Martin Luther King Jr., that is, Yeah. I wasn't totally surprised by it because we've certainly had a series of events like this, nothing quite as dramatic as this one. But this one was visceral. This one, you just couldn't help but be touched by it. As a mother, I teared up at this grown man calling for his dead mama. I just, every time I think about it, I think of my own 2 boys. I thought of all the times my boys faced Canada's subtle form of racism. I thought about the time my daughter came home. She was about 3 at the time, and she said, Mom, why doesn't X's mom let me into her house? She lets all the other children in, but she sends me home. And how do you tell a 3-year-old that, this is racism? I just couldn't do it. I didn't want her to feel that she was any less valid as a human being. So I told her that this lady just didn't understand what a wonderful person she was, and it was her loss. And my son used to play with a child on the street, and the boy called him a racial name. And he was older, so he understood what the name meant. So he just stopped talking to this child, but he didn't say anything to me. But when I saw that the child wasn't hanging out with my son anymore, I said to him, what happened? And he explained to me what happened. And, it hits you that no matter how much you try to frame the message in the form of injustice and discrimination as a wider human failing, it touches them in a very personal way. So I built a basketball court in the back of our yard and kept them home and safe, where I could see them all the time. The kids would come to us rather than them being exposed to others. You know, I remembered how many times the sight of a police officer would fill me with fear, because as a Black person, the stories of dead Black people is always at the back of your mind. And, you know, it didn't matter that you have very positive interactions with other police officers. There's always that fear of the one who's going to be different. So I guess that's what I thought of, and that's why, you know, I'm very touched by this event, and I understand the thousands of people who are touched by it, because we want to be in that post-racial age. We want to see each other as human beings. But in order to do that, we have to address it in a very personal way.
Yeah. And I mean, what you're saying just reminds me, you know, it's personal, but for you as a mother, you know, the kinds of thinking on your feet that you had to do just to answer those questions that you never wanted to hear from your child. Exactly. Building a basketball court in your own backyard so that there was a safe place for your kids. I mean, that's how many people feel the need to do that, you know, and I would venture that most of us as parents haven't. Anyways, that's incredible. So, I mean, you've touched on your kids' experiences of racism. What about you yourself? What was your first experience of racism?
Well, the one I want to talk about is the one that impacted me the most. I mean, I actually didn't feel that I was a victim of racism before I went to England. And the one that impacted me the most was as a fresh young nurse. You know, a patient rang her bell and I went in, and she looked at me and she said, "I don't want a Black person looking after me." And I looked at her and I thought, no, how stupid can you be? I'm the only one here. I'm all you have. I was the only nurse on the ward, right?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, and stepped back. She managed to get herself out of bed. She got herself to the washroom. But then she couldn't manage to get herself back up and back to bed. So she looked at me and she said, "Aren't you going to help me?" And I smiled at her and I said, "I'm still Black." So she, you know, she was forced in that moment to kind of reassess her situation. And she came to the realization that she was in a bit of predicament.
Yeah.
So she apologized, and then I helped her back to bed. But, you know, that was the experience that kind of stayed with me over the years, because it was the first time I really felt like, you know, I was less than human to this person.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, interesting, because I mean, racism is a power issue. And there you were in that moment, somebody exercising this powerful, you know, ideology that she was better than you, and yet you were in a position of power there as well. But she even in that moment, it doesn't sound like she acknowledged your humanity, only her own needs.
Well, and that's it. You know, I grew up, and I guess I had to come to terms with my privilege as well, because I was privileged by my parents standing in my community. You know, I was privileged by going to one of the best schools in the island. And I was privileged to go into the profession that I wanted. Now, my dad wouldn't think that much of it, but that's what I wanted to do. And my mom supported me, right?
Yeah.
So, but, you know, there were kids around me who didn't have that privilege. There were kids around me who, from their birth, were designated as underprivileged. So I didn't understand that piece of it either, that I had this special privilege, right? Until this woman made me see that I was the Black.
Right. So you really experienced a major shift in your life.
Yeah,
You know, your own experience of privilege to going to a place where you weren't guaranteed that privilege.
exactly.
Yeah. So what did that do to you?
It made me more aware.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I think at the time, that was in the 60s. So the Black Power movement was going on at that time. So I started to pay more attention to that, primarily to Martin Luther King's movement,
Mhm.
and became more involved in thinking about what can you do to change this and how can you support that movement. So when I see the young people now getting involved, it reminds me of when I was their age,
Yeah.
and getting involved and saying, wait a minute, this isn't the world I want to live in.
Yeah.
So I can make a difference, by pushing for the change that I want.
Right. Right. So you were, I don't know whether activist is the right word, but you were certainly very aware of wanting to be a part of that change.
Aware,
Yeah.
exactly, because
Yeah.
I lived in England. I wasn't in the United States, but
Sure.
very much like the rest of the world is getting involved now,
Mhm.
and saying, we understand, we support you. It's the
Mhm.
same way the world got involved in that era,
Yeah.
and really understood the message that Martin Luther King Jr.
Mhm.
was trying to
Yeah.
reach out to everyone.
Yeah. Now, you connected me to an article that your daughter Kathleen wrote, and
Right.
she's actually gotten quite a bit of attention for this article, and we're actually
Mhm.
going to attach that article to this video. But in her article, she mentions about having the talk from you
Mhm.
as she was growing up. Can you tell us about the talk? What was the talk you
Well,
gave with your
the
kids?
talk she referred to is the one that her dad gave them.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I, as I said, I wanted to believe that we lived in a post-racial age.
Mm,
So I didn't want to focus on the race part of it. I wanted to focus on the injustice
mm,
part of it and discrimination. So I talked to them about the Irish experience, where these people were the same race, but they still discriminated against each other.
yeah.
Or the European experience. Their dad taught them, put your hand on, the hood, say yes, sir, no, sir, do all the right things and you'll be okay. So I didn't want them to see their blackness as a curse or
Mm,
see themselves as a victim. That's why I focused on, looking at across the world at areas where people, even of the same race, discriminated against each other. But, it soon became apparent that the Irish could become white in the sense of the power that it gives you by overcoming socioeconomic disadvantages. White Europeans could overcome their accents, which made them the other, right? But Black and brown people can't overcome their color.
mm.
You know,
It
even
doesn't
if you're
change. Yeah.
exactly, even if your child is as light as I am, they're still considered Black.
Mm,
So they are still going to be subject to the kind of discrimination that we're talking about now.
mhm.
So you're still vulnerable. And I think now, I don't know what I could tell my grandchildren that would protect them
Mm,
from racist people or police violence. That's what scares Black parents. That's what scares Black families.
right.
You tell them all the things they should do, you bring them up. For instance, in my case, you bring them up in a Christian home, you teach them right and wrong. My sons are older than my daughter. They were always protective of their sisters, their sister rather. And yet there is no guarantee that that will keep them safe.
Yeah. Yeah. So the talk came out of a belief that there was action that you might be able to do to protect yourself. But what we're seeing is that
Exactly.
that what you wear, what you say, how you speak to people in authority or people who consider themselves better than you, there's nothing that's going to guarantee that they won't do something or say something to you that is hurtful and harmful. Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask, what would the talk be different, but you're saying that there, you don't know what you would say now. If I can just sort of tweak the question a little bit, what are parents of color needing to tell their kids? It's not the talk that says, here's how you can be safe, but
well, I think that the current talk now is you have to become involved. You have to stand up for social justice, right? That's what, my grandkids were out marching for the climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And they're 9 and 6. And they were on the climate change march. And that's the talk that people are having with their children now, is get involved, become, the force that changes the world that you want to live in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because we're talking about changes to deep systems and deep ideologies and attitudes. We're in the middle of a pandemic right now, and we know that viruses are not racist. And yet we are also seeing that, in various parts of the world, but certainly we're seeing it in the United States. We're seeing it in Canada as well, that people who are Black or people of color are sometimes experiencing higher death rates as a result of this pandemic. What are the things that come to mind that you have maybe seen that help us understand why this is happening?
There's a racial element to it because of the socioeconomic disadvantages. Mm-hmm. That's a key factor. Mm-hmm. Black and brown people are more likely to have jobs that put them in public areas. Mm-hmm. They're more likely to have jobs that they have to be physically present at. Mm-hmm. They are more likely to live in poor conditions where they can't social distance, where there are more people living together. Mm-hmm. So even though in Canada we have accessible healthcare, thank God for that, because if you layer not having healthcare onto that picture, then you see the dismal outcomes that they have in the United States, right? That's right. But we still have to address the social determinants of health that disadvantage the have-nots. Mm-hmm. And I would say, as much as we're talking about Black and brown people, it's the have-nots of all races. Yeah. We need to consider the impact of mental health on physical health. Mm-hmm. Consider this. Studies suggest that the levels of cortisol from long-term stress increases your blood cholesterol, your triglycerides, your blood sugar, and your blood pressure. And these are all risk factors for heart disease. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, the stress can cause a buildup of plaque in your arteries. So that this predisposes you to vascular disease as well. Mm-hmm. So does that knowledge change your attitude towards the health condition of some groups in our society? Mm-hmm. We tend to look at people and think, they're unhealthy because they're not doing the right things. But sometimes they're unhealthy because society is not doing the right things for them. Yeah. If you think about the stress that Black and brown people live under, is it any wonder that they have higher heart disease than the rest of the population? Is it any wonder that they have high blood pressure more so than the rest of the population?
Yeah. When dignity and privilege aren't shared or extended to others, then you add another layer of stress.
Exactly.
When you can live.
Go ahead. They live with every day.
Yeah. what, you mentioned earlier that in the 60s there was this sense that you were living in a time when you were moving past racism. We know we aren't past it today, in our oh so enlightened age, in this oh so enlightened country of Canada. Where do you see racism still happening?
Well, let me start by saying that I consider myself as privileged.
Okay.
I've been successful. I'm probably the person that white people will look at and say, oh, see, we're not racist because she achieved whatever she achieved, right?
Yeah.
But, I'm kind of the absolution. But think about this. I hired somebody who was black, and I got accused of being biased. Now, this person was overqualified for the position. They had more experience in that particular area than the other people who applied for the position. But yet my hiring her was questionable because we were both black. On the other hand, I hired a white person who actually didn't have the qualifications, but I saw a lot of potential in her. So I hired her. I never got one question about hiring her. You see, this is the sort of thing that we don't think about as racist, but it has a significant impact on the other people. Because it's, that other black woman, if I had worried about the fact that people think I'm prejudiced because I hired her, I wouldn't have hired her. But she deserved a position.
Yeah. So you're put in a position where you're second guessing your good decisions.
Yeah.
Or you're being questioned for them anyway.
Or exactly. So that's why I keep saying that it will take all of us becoming aware of the systemic issues and being aware of our own biases, because we are, we're unfortunately naturally biased because we're tribal.
Yeah, we are. And I mean, I honestly, this is the question that I'm kind of dreading asking the most, but we can talk about racism in our neighbor to the south. We can talk about racism in our own country. What about in the church? Because the church, we are supposed to be this gracious group of people who've been saved by the grace of Jesus Christ. But we're still human, and we gather together. Have you seen racism in the church?
Well, unfortunately, churches aren't exempt. Well-meaning Christian people don't think about what they're saying or doing that may be considered racist, right? As I've said before, my family is part African and part white.
Yeah.
My children are Guinean and Jamaican. So when I'm at a service, and it's not you, it's another church I went to, and the pastor made a statement that in seminary, they would joke about being punished by God by being sent to Africa. Well, I take affront to that because I don't want my children to think that they're from a heritage that is disdained by God. And that's the message in that statement, right?
Yeah.
And when I go to a talk and a missionary refers to Africans as poor savages, I take affront to that too. So as Christian people, we need to think about what we say and how it's going to make the other person feel. Or, especially when you have children in your congregation.
Yeah, it's that labeling again. Labeling people, putting a blanket label over a whole group of people and assuming that you're speaking truth. And I mean,
my thought is that systemic racism exists when the media only covers poor, countries of color as poor and backwards.
Right.
That they're underdeveloped without showing the progress they've made. I didn't know that Africa had developed cities, had palatial homes. I went into homes in Africa that are, much bigger and better than a lot of homes I've been into in Canada. And they have their established businesses and they have industries and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that until I actually went to Africa, because the media shows just the underdeveloped side.
Right.
And the church does it too,
mm-hmm.
in an unintentional way. You see starving children all the time. But the church is very much a part of that progress in the developing world.
Mm-hmm.
They actually have been at the forefront of building schools, of building youth hospitals and so on.
Yeah.
Well, let's see part of that.
Yeah.
It's not going to devalue how much people give you. It's going to make them feel that what they're given is actually being put to good use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because when you keep seeing only the starving children, I have to tell you, and I support a few charities,
mm-hmm.
you still start to wonder, well, what are they doing with the money?
Yeah.
So you've got to show the two sides.
That's right. Yeah. That there is a work being done, that lives are being helped. Yeah.
And exactly.
This is an aside, but you talked about the way we portray different parts of the world, including Africa. And at this point, I'm sharing somebody else's story. So this is not my story, but someone who shared a story with me of being on a cruise ship, going through the Straits of Gibraltar. So, on one side is Europe and on the other side is Africa. And I have seen the Straits of Gibraltar at night, so I know what it looks like. But on this cruise ship, as they were going through, they overheard one of the other passengers saying, "Yeah, that's Africa over there." And another passenger said, "But it can't be Africa because look, there are lights on." And this was at night, and they were seeing electric lights and assuming, well, it can't be Africa because they don't have electric lights, which is ridiculous. Yes. But we do. We have these ingrained ideas, and you're right. We've unintentionally, we have perpetuated these ideas of deepest, darkest Africa, or name another country of the world, as opposed to, I love what you said a minute ago, that in a hiring process you recognize the potential in someone, and we need to recognize that there's incredible potential in all of humanity, regardless of where we are, and let's see that potential being grown. Erone, you have your own deep and personal faith in Jesus Christ, and I would think at times situations like these kinds of inequalities and this kind of treatment, and watching your kids be treated this way, that could erode your faith, and yet it seems like it hasn't. How has your faith informed your response to racism as you've seen it and experienced it?
Well, I shake my head and say, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Yeah, okay.
but you're right. There are times that you really have to dig deeper. Yeah. And, you realize also that you have to follow the Lord's example. He didn't sit by and keep quiet about injustice, right? We have to be grounded in the Bible. Yeah. And it frustrates me when people who obviously haven't read the Bible, start to talk about things in ways that is not the way of the Lord, right?
Right.
And
let alone posing with a Bible, if I can dare bring that up.
Oh, well, that was just ludicrous. So I groaned my actions, and I groaned my attitudes towards other people in the word of the Lord. I know that I'm called to love my neighbor as myself. Matthew 22. I'm called to look at the interest of others over my own self-interest. That's Philippians. I'm called to forgive. to be at peace with others. I'm called to be just to foreigners, to the fatherless, the needy, the poor. These are all things that Christ himself told us to do. So really what we need to do is open that Bible, don't just pose with it, and read his words, because that will set us on the right track. And too many churches have lost their way. I hate to see that. I hate to have to talk about it, but too many churches have lost their way. We need to find our way back to the word of the Lord. We need to find our way back to the example that he set for us and that he's going to hold us accountable to.
Yeah. Again, if I can just jump in for a second, I mean, it also makes me think that, churches have lost their way because we have wanted to guard our own privilege and power, as opposed to taking the power that God has given us and using it on behalf of others, which is exactly what you're saying. Here's Jesus telling us, love the foreigner, the enemy. Yeah. I
mean, when you think of it, he made the ultimate sacrifice. And yet, as you said, we're standing back and saying, oh, Lord will take care of it. And we don't get involved.
Yeah. So let me jump from that then. As a white Christian in Canada, speaking for myself, what do I need to know? What do I need to do to actually help in guarding the dignity of all people, regardless of the color of their skin or their background? What would you say?
Well, as I mentioned before, we're all tribal. I mean, let's get over that. We have tribal mentality. We tend to stick to our own groups. We tend to see things through the eyes of our own group. And in this case, we're talking about being stuck with our racial identity. But we need to be aware of this tendency to be tribal. So I asked myself, do I see white people as primarily racist? Do I take it further by assuming that my white friends are not racist, but I don't share social media, discussions about race with them? So in that, you're thinking, well, you're still starting to decide that they might be racist, right?
Yeah. Rather than challenging it or checking it out.
Exactly. So I challenge my white friends to examine how they see the other. Do you support foreign aid, but lament with your friends about too many of them coming to Canada?
Yeah.
Do you see Muslims as future converts or terrorist threats? Do you instinctively walk further away from the Black person on the street?
Right.
Does a Black man appear threatening just by being virtue of a Black man, especially if he's a big Black man? And do you automatically assume that the white person is the boss? I've had that happen to me.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was with a white friend of mine, and we were going to a conference, right? And the person who came up to us automatically assumed she was the boss
because she was white.
Yeah.
Okay.
We both just laughed, and she's really good at handling that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But my point is, when you do that, because you probably will, kind of check yourself and think, okay, did I just do that? And how do I change that in the future, right?
Yeah.
So, we need to examine our own biases, and we need to have the hard conversations with each other. Because if we don't, our politicians, as our leader said this week, there is no systemic racism in Canada. They'll say that because we're not challenging them in, and we're not saying to them, look at it, it's here, you know, and we need to do something about it. And I think we also have to get involved. it's not about looting and burning down things. It's about peacefully standing up and saying, I stand for something. Because if you do nothing, you're complicit.
Yeah. Which is probably one of the easiest sins to commit, is to do nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's even easier for Christian people, because we all say, I'm going to pray about it and God will take care of it. Well, God will take care of it through us. Acting on his word.
Yeah. There's a reason why Jesus gave us a commission. It's because he wasn't going to do it all miraculously. He wanted the miracles to come through human beings like you and me. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Erone, thank you so much. Like I said, I am going to put the link to your daughter Kathleen's article with this video. But I hope that this maybe is the beginning of a discussion in our church, but beyond. First of all, to say, yeah, we are racist. So let's stop defending ourselves, and let's start working to be the version of ourselves that God created us to be, which is equal and extending dignity. So thank you. Really appreciate the time, and I really appreciate you, your willingness to share personally and out of your own experience. But this has been great.
Well, I'd also like to thank you for having the willingness to have this conversation and to be open to examining, how do we really feel? And does this exist in our society, and what can we do about it? So I think, as I told you, when I first came to the church, I prayed about it and I asked God to lead me, and he told me, this is where you belong. And I couldn't help but think, when you got in touch with me, I said, I guess you were right, Lord.
Well, I'm really glad you're here with us, and this has been awesome. So thank you. God bless you, Erone.
God bless you also.